We're at 4,800 days over. Well, I think it's like 4,800. I'm just guessing off the top of my head. It's 4,008.
World War II was fought and won in the time it's taken you to write Winds of Winter, George. You fat
Drunk 3PO hit 100,000 subscribers, okay?
Right?
Like, I mean, that just shows you how long this has taken.
We're going on our fourth presidential term since his last book. All right. George R. R. Martin is in the news. Recently, he made a post. There's been a lot of talk of House of the Dragons. Not so great ending, although I really did like the show all the way up to the ending. And he put up a post a few days ago saying basically he hasn't been writing because of the rise of fascism.
Oh, that's it?
Any excuse with George.
He's like, I watched a documentary about World War II and I'm still really shaken up about it. So, yeah. Really affected me.
And he took some issue with Ryan Condell, even though he completely signed off on the scene that they basically got rid of a character. The blood and cheese thing, we talked about it a lot on our live streams that you can go watch anytime you want. They fucked up the blood and cheese scene and they got rid of a character. And that character is pretty important to the story. That character was always meant to die, but why am I brain farting on the name, Ryan? It is Maelor. Yeah. And
basically, Maelor, usually there's three kids. There's the twins, the boy and the girl twin, and then another son, Maelor.
Yeah.
And then when Jaehaerys gets killed, Maelor is the youngest, and one witnesses his brother's head being chopped off in front of him, and he knows that his mother chose his brother to actually live instead of him, but he now becomes the heir, and of course they need to try to get him to safety. That doesn't end up very well. He gets essentially torn to pieces like by the small folk trying to get Maelor later in the story. But yeah, go ahead.
What's the consensus on House of the Dragon? I mean, I heard really good stuff about the first season. So what's the consensus now as to where it stands? Are people very, very happy? Are they kind of falling off? Like what's
the first season was really, really good. And at times like great. Second season drop off. I still think there was some great moments. One of the biggest problems is that ending and the fact that during production, during the writer's strike, they got told, hey, you're not going to have the budget to do this massive battle at the end. So we're going to cut the season from 10 episodes down to 8. It was during the writer's strike and they couldn't rewrite it. So essentially the season ended on what felt to a lot of people like, okay, this would have been all right if it was like the 8th episode or the 7th episode, but not for the season finale. Turns out that's kind of what it was. I still think overall people think that the show is solid and one of the better shows we're seeing right now. But there are, some things that they're doing in terms of choices they made that people don't agree with.
I think it's still generally well received. I just think that not that many people are interested in it, which is a real shame. I think it's got nowhere near the impact and the cultural footprint that Game of Thrones had at its peak. It's not that.
What people were upset about is they wanted more. So it's not like this sucks. It's you fucking gave us blue balls. We wanted more. So that's still positive, right? The last scene was fucking cringe. It was forced. It was cringed. It was there for the fucking message. There's no other way around saying that. But up to that, everything else made sense. And they fucked up the character of Alicent with that final scene. I won't say beyond repair, but at least what we've seen so far.
I think as well, like Viserys was very much the glue that held season 1 together. And I was worried, like, without him, what are we going to have? Like, is there a character that we're going to root for? And we kind of don't have that now. Like, when it came to Rhaenyra and Alicent, like, which one's going to prevail, how they're going to fare and stuff, I find myself not really caring either way. Because I don't particularly like either of those characters. I don't like they're well written for sure, but like they're not. Neither of them are particularly like good people, and so I there's not a clear like, well, this is a person I really support or I agree with or whatever. They're both kind of shitty people that have done shitty things and failed in a lot of ways, and it's just it leans so heavily into that moral ambiguity that there's almost nothing to draw from it.
Exactly.
By the time you're done.
That was my concern with the show because they're driving it through Alicent and Rhaenyra. Alicent disappears from the story. She pops up here and there, but you can't drive the story through her because she's not part of it after this. Rhaenyra is there. She's there, but she's not out there fighting battles. And what you're doing is you're adapting a history where George just said, this event happened. This event happened. So you're not following the through line of a character.
Yeah, you're adapting a Wikipedia versions of, hey, big battles of World War II. And like you're following through that. And it's like, here were some of the key players. But you don't know anything about the people themselves.
It's actually kind of scary how much, because I know people have said this before, like George essentially took the War of the Roses in the UK as part of British history and just adapted it into a story. And it's actually quite scary how fucking closely it mirrors that, to the point where it's like, did you put any real like imagination into this, or did you just like take historical events, change the characters' names, and then away you went? Because that's kind of what this show feels like now.
Yeah.
And he also copied from Lord of the Rings. He also copied from Wheel of Time. He did a lot of copying.
Oh, Babylon 5. He copied from Babylon 5, too.
But one thing I did like that he said in this is that you can have a relatively small change in a story that has ripple effects that go on and like magnify over time that you can't predict.
Oh.
And it's the same that we found in Rings of Power. Like if you remove the Catholicism from then it doesn't work. Or we introduced Adar, we made Sauron a love interest, and then you end up with the rings in the wrong order, and you're constantly trying to plaster over mistakes, all because you made a minor change right at the start.
So here is, you retweeted this earlier today, and I couldn't agree with this more. I've said this before. Nihilism isn't really the most satisfying story. It's George R. R. Martin is a Twilight Zone writer, is a science fiction writer. He writes short stories. I've read a lot of them, not all of them. I like some of his TV scripts. He's really good at that stuff, but he's really good with the morality tale that ends a little fucked up. Not big on happy endings, George R. R. Martin is. And this guy nails it. This is why we're not getting the Wins a Winner. So do you want to read this, Drinker? Or should I get somebody else who is literate?
All right, well, I'm still sober enough to do it, so you might have to scroll down as I progress through it. But okay, here's what Song of Ice and Fire actually wants to be and why George can't finish it. The Song of Ice and Fire isn't actually supposed to be dark, Machiavellian, hopeless, or a subversion of Tolkien at all. It's supposed to start that way. The details may be complex, but the formula is simple. Low fantasy version of the British Isles torn apart by a multi-sided Machiavellian power struggle loosely based on the War of the Roses. Things are bad because of the Machiavellian power struggle. In the background, subtle hints of an external, magical, otherworldly threat. Warring factions scoff and ignore it at first. Enter the high fantasy tropes. Prophesized hero emerges to unite the morally grey factions into an unambiguously good, pro-civilization force to confront and defeat the unambiguously evil threat to all of life.
And this is Brandon Sanderson. Like, this is literally the Stormlight Archive. Everything starts in a broken world, and then you move through to the heroes.
Full transition, in the end, to epic Tolkien-esque high fantasy, played straight rather than subverted. Yeah, fucking imagine that. Imagine genuine, like, emotions put into things. Heroism triumphant, humanity triumphant, the realm unified in peace and prosperity. Roll the credits. Were the story to be completed thus, completed as it wants to be completed, as it yearns to be completed, every dark, gritty Machiavellian moment would be fully justified. Every chapter and scene filled with thugs and villains and no heroes at all would be fully justified, because they would merely serve to emphasize the rarity of heroes and the need for them, because they would make the arrival of a true hero that much more satisfying, late but not too late that he arrived. A Song of Ice and Fire doesn't really want to be a subversion of Tolkien at all. It wants to be a path out of darkness and into light. It wants to be a study in how Tolkien is deeply relevant, even to a gritty, morally grey world. This is what George knows it needs to be, but George cannot write it. Why? Because he's a socialist and a boomer. And he's fucking lazy. Socialism's motivational core is envy, and it's one that's underlying rule is thou shalt not be better than me.
Wow.
The boomer's single guiding principle is whatever makes me feel pleasure right now is good, and whatever makes me feel bad right now is evil. Take these together and you get someone who has a real problem with heroes. Heroes are, by definition, the best of us, at least on some dimension. And if your underlying motivation is envy, standing next to one is going to make you feel bad. This means that socialists, boomers, and socialist boomers tend not to want to believe in heroes and heroism. They want to convince themselves that anything which appears good is secretly evil, actually, and that anyone who makes them feel or look bad is obviously evil because reasons. So when they see a hero, they tend to call them a fascist. Of course, when they see a fascist, they also call him a fascist. But that's just coincidence, because they'll call anything fascist. Random passers-by, buildings, rocks, trees, squirrels, anything. Because they want to feel morally superior to him. The only way that they can admit that someone has a moral compass at all is if they can feel superior to him in some way. Usually by portraying them as naive and hence doomed to failure, because he is not empowered by cynicism and selfishness to pursue the most efficient path to whatever. So if old George thinks that everyone who appears good is either secretly evil or openly stupid, then writing a character with heroic impulses is going to be tough, and writing how they succeed is impossible. This is why George can write characters with noble motives, Jon Snow, Eddard Stark, etc., but he keeps making them fail. You see, in George's world, heroism must be a sham or a weakness, because then George's own bad character is wisdom and enlightenment instead of lack of moral virtue. If heroes are all frauds and suckers, then George is being smart because he has seen through the whole heroism thing. If heroes are real, then they do sometimes succeed, and they do make the world better for everyone. Then George is just a fat, lazy, cynical old man who doesn't want to finish his art for the sake of art or integrity, because he only ever wanted money, and now he has more than he knows what to do with. In order to finish the story, George would need to have an awakening of virtue. He would first have to develop a sense of integrity, a desire to fulfill his promises, even when no one can or will punish him for not doing so. He would have to develop a sense of humility, because to write a better person than he is, he would have to admit to himself that he is such a thing, that people can be better, and that trying to be better is an actual worthy goal, not just the act of falling for a con game run to control you. The longer someone goes without admitting their faults, the harder those faults are to admit to, because they have been more deeply invested in. And this means he would also have to develop the courage to admit to himself that he is, in fact, a fat, lazy, cynical old coward, and that Tolkien, who he envies and despises, was the far better man all along.
George is Tolkien's bitch. Thanks,
Sorry,
bro. I forgot how long that was. I probably should have taken over.
I didn't do it justice. Yeah,
That was beautiful.
I was starting to run dry towards the end.
Get some booze in this man now.
He's kicking in as it went on.
Yeah. Don't worry, I got my lubricant right here. He was absolutely fucking right, though.
Fucking
this guy
100%
was right
right
on the money about George and like everything that his writing is based on.
Yeah, this is why you will never ever see the end of the book, and I don't think you're going to see wins a winner.
That's like the question. It's not even a question of will he finish it. The question is, will he get out the second to last book now? That's what the conversation's changed to.
Are there supposed
He's
to be?
two. So
Two.
He's got this one, I don't know, like 50, 60% complete. He'll do that maybe, and then he'll die. And then he'll either have to ghostwrite it, or like that'll just be it. It'll stop.
Yeah, and then he's got to finish Dunk and Egg. We hope he doesn't.
That's two more books than Dunk and Egg, right?
He's got to finish Dunk and Egg, Fire and Blood Part 2.
George loves publicity and adoration and the quick and easy wins. He loves going to premieres and conventions and like having adoration from fans. People just want to meet him, take his picture, do interviews, all that stuff. All of the things that are easy, the schmoozing. He doesn't want to do the hard work of actually sitting down at his computer to write a book. And like he's at the point where he's too old and he's too lazy and he's too unmotivated to get himself to do it.
Yeah, just get a ghostwriter.
Well, he's already rich, and so a lot of the incentive or drive seems to have been
and it happened later on in his life, right? So he wants to enjoy it while he can, and nobody blames him for that.
He was like grinding for a long time earlier in his life.
He was, yeah.
And
you know, like as a writer myself, I understand that that appeal of the position he's in. Shit, man, I'd love to be in that position.
People would
where
kill
it's like,
to be in that position.
all your books are getting turned into TV shows and stuff. That's cool as fuck, man. But never forget what put you where you are. It's your books, and it's the fans of your books that supported you throughout all those years when you weren't a big deal. That's who you owe a debt to. I've been asked about this before. Like, does an author owe anything to their fans?
Yes.
Do they have to complete something? And I say, yes, they fucking do. maybe not legally, maybe not in any like binding term or whatever, but you have entered into an agreement with the people that have agreed to support you and make you the success that you are. And if you don't make good on that, then you're a fucking fraud and a hack, and you don't deserve the success that you've got.
Well, the issue is
Well
that
said.
the reason why you owe them that book is because it's a duty. But duty wouldn't come under the kind of the socialist lazy point of view. It's the same reason that you can't finish the book because of heroism. Duty is something that a hero would do. I do this even though I sacrifice for it because nobody else will, and so I have to because I have the power to.
I'm not going to take away from his actual writing ability, like his ability to put words to paper when he eventually gets round to doing it. He's clearly been massively competent and good at what he does there. But man, that philosophy for storytelling is it's so bleak, it's so nihilistic, it's so contrary to the human spirit. I want to read things like this and be inspired. I want to be uplifted by it ultimately. Yeah, there can be travails and trials and difficulties and challenges along the way. People can strive and fail, but I want them to ultimately succeed. I want heroes to eventually emerge worthy people who deserve to like make the world a better place. That's what you should do with stories. It's your ability to uplift the human spirit. And if you don't want to do that, ultimately, where are you going to take it to? Everything is pointless. Nobody's good or bad. It's all just people struggling to survive. What are you teaching your audience then? Like, what are you giving them to grapple onto? What are you giving them to be inspired by? Nothing. This is why Tolkien is celebrated 50, 60, 100, 200 years after his death. People will remember him. Will they remember George R.R. Martin? I don't know.
Yeah, for the record, I don't want to read stories about heroes and like uplifting. I like characters that are more miserable than I am, right? That's what I want to be. Makes me feel a little better about myself.
Misery porn is good in doses.
Yeah,
like,
ultimately, I think the reason, obviously I'm kidding a little bit, but the reason I think that in addition to all that laundry list of things is why George has struggled with the ending of the book, because Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 were so like poorly received the way that they were, it has put so much pressure on him to have him like fix it. Oh, I'm sure when George tells it, it'll be great. The only reason it's bad because Dan and Dave fucked it up, all these things. I think that added such a new layer of pressure on him. And I think he feels his legacy is more intact if he just never finishes it, with that hypothetical of him finishing it off in a very satisfying way versus if he fucks it up. And I think he's just really a coward.
He wouldn't be in this position if he'd fucking finished his books before the show got to its final season. He had 8 seasons, 8 years to finish his novels, and he didn't do it.
Yeah, imagine if he wrote a better book and then the series was worse and people were like, this is what you should have done. Then he would have gone down as a hero.
If the book existed, the show would have been better.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but like from probably book 3 or 4 onwards, he massively broadened out the scope of the series, like to the point where it was unmanageable. Yeah. Now he's got so many plot threads, so many characters, so many arcs. He doesn't know what to do with it all, and he doesn't know how to end it.
The first 3 books came out within 2 years of each other. They were really tight. They were like really well-told stories, and then it just branched out. And then A Feast for Crows was just a split in 2 book. A Dance with Dragons was a book split in 2 that he still took 5 years to re-edit. And with The Winds of Winter, there's a bunch of chapters that he cut out of A Dance with Dragons. So like he had chapters already for The Winds of Winter, like ready to go, that he cut out of that book. And like, who knows what he's written? It sounds like he's written nothing for the last 2 years. Poor Jon Snow, still bleeding out at Castle Black for 13 years. Poor guy.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.